for the public schools over the years. I would like to start today's engagement session with a territorial acknowledgement. I am a grateful uninvited guest on the territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, also known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. Here's a picture of Peacoats Mountain that's just right behind my house. And often I go up there and really appreciate the beauty of the land that we live in. Please feel free if you would like to add an acknowledgement from where you're coming from. We'd love to hear that. I would like to begin today's program or a series with welcoming Jeremy Higgs, our Executive Director, Educational Analytics Office, to open this session. Over to you.
Thank you, Sri, and thanks everybody for joining today. I am, for those who don't know me, I'm Jeremy Higgs. I'm the Executive Director of the Education Analytics Office, and I am very glad to be here today. This is the final session of the 23-24 school year. And as Sri mentioned, our first year of having engagement sessions on data topics for our ministry staff. And we started these because we have a lot of data in this ministry, and we have a lot of data products. We have several platforms for people to use data. A great place to start for people in the ministry, of course, is our data hub. And in there, you'll find some really good starting data like the facts and figures page. We'll also have our data release schedule that's there. For those that are really interested, there you go. Thank you. Facts and figures is there. We have our previous recordings and information from our sessions. And we also get into, and this is something that I'm glad we do, is we have our briefing decks for various topics. So if you want to see more information and more detail about topics that we have briefed the minister on and our executive on, you will find them there. And we've also got our district profiles, which pull together information from a lot of different sources in the ministry about each of the districts. And we've also got our student success website and links to the BC Data Catalog, which is our open data, and also importantly, our BC childcare data and reports as well. We have so much data, and increasingly we are using it to inform what we do and how we do it. And we're also evaluating what we do with our data. And it's just, we feel it's really important for us to share information with you, to make sure that there's certain things that people should know about our system. And you guys will have heard me say this before. You should know how many kids are enrolled in the system, which is to say 696,422 at September 30th of last year, with 604,728 in public schools and 91,694 in independent schools. We should roughly know how many kids are in our system. And there's also the nuanced stuff as well, like knowing about trends and outcomes among priority populations. So we started offering this stuff so we could have more of this information available to folks. And we're going to do these again next year. So if you have any questions or suggestions on how we can improve that, we'd love to hear that. And today, we're going to have a special topic that is going to be about workforce. So I'm going to pass it back to Sri, who will introduce it. And thank you for coming today. I'm really glad that lots of folks are coming to these. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you all for joining us. I would just give a brief introduction of our team. We are the Educational Analytics Office, EAO, and the authoritative source of BC K-12 data and analysis on student enrollment, demographics, experience, outcomes, and workforce. We want to make data available and accessible in an easy to understand manner for decision makers so that they can take action and improve student outcomes and increase access to the quality experience for all our learners. We have 5 teams, the Research and Analytics Engagement team, the Data Infrastructure Operations team, the Economics and Data Science Lab team, the Data Use and Indigenous Analytics that make up the EAO office. Today, for the session, we will show you some products and services that we have on various platforms. Also, I would like to invite Jacob Hunt, who is a lead economist in the Economics and Data Science Lab, who is going to give us an overview of the K-12 workforce dashboard. As well as I'd like to invite Megan Petruko as a policy analyst from the workforce development team, and she's going to show us how we can use the K-12 workforce data to inform ministry policies. We have some time for some questions and feedback on these topics if you have. And to wrap up, I'd like to invite Mahi to give us a reflection on the collective experience and how do we plan for next year for these series. Moving ahead, as Jeremy mentioned, we are on Connect. So as soon as you go on the main page of Connect here, there is a teal color button, which is called the ECC Data Hub. And this is what you need to know. If you have this link to the Connect page, you can go to our Data Hub, which has all the links that you require for any data requirement or data access that you would need. And as Jeremy mentioned, we have data on various platforms, on Power BI, which are our dashboards, on the data catalog and student success. These two are public facing. Data in those public facing platforms is masked, as well as we have data at various aggregation levels. So most of the data is available between all these platforms, and it's ready for you to use and apply it in any of your products as well and presentations. Thank you, Jacob, for joining us today. I would pass it to Jacob to give us an overview of the K-12 workforce dashboard. Thanks, Jacob.
All right. Hello, everyone. Let me just start sharing my screen, and we'll take a look through the K-12 workforce dashboard. So before I jump into the actual dashboard itself, I want to talk a little bit about what data is in it, the frequency that we get this data, as well as some of the limitations that are currently within the dashboard. The data that we get is through the EDAS system, which is the Employment Data and Analysis System. And all the data that we get from there is provided to us directly from the Employers Association, BCPC. So they're the ones that are actually collecting the data directly from the school districts, and then it's given off to us to do analysis with and use in our reporting. We get the data 4 times a year, basically once a quarter. And the most recent data that we have access to is from Q3 of the current school year. So covering the period of January to the end of March. Since the data that we get from the districts and BCPC is essentially payroll data, it covers very basic things like the number of employees working in particular roles, the FTEs associated with their roles, salaries, and we sort of break that out by individual staff groupings, where they're working, and using that data to calculate student to staff ratios based on our enrollment numbers. The limitations that we have in this data are more of the more detailed demographic data on some of the individuals. So we have basic things like age and gender, but they're currently doing some restructuring about the gender field and how it's included in the data to be more inclusive. We also don't have indigeneity status or self-reporting of the individual staff members. We're not able to use this data to link individual teachers or staff to the grades that they're teaching or what classes they're teaching. And we're not able to link the data that we currently have to particular individual certification data that we might get from the teacher regulation branch. But what it does provide is basic headcounts, FTEs, and trends over time for the staff groups that we're interested in. So without further ado, we present the data in 5 major groups. We look at all staff, teachers, administrators, unionized support staff, and then non-unionized support staff. Furthermore, we present the data at a provincial level as well as at a district level data. The way that this page is structured, we have 3 main visuals that detail what staff looks like, as well as some basic cards with information. So right now we have it set to be Q3 of the 23-24 school year, which is the most up-to-date data that we have. And we can see that in the bottom left-hand corner, we have headcount and FTE broken down by staff grouping. We have headcount and age grouping and gender. And then headcount and FTE by school year, essentially providing us a time series and trend with the most as we get data. We also have headcount, the average FTE, average salary, age, and student staff ratios. So at this sort of grand level, we are able to see that there are currently 93,000 staff working in the public school system, with roughly 50,000 teachers, 40,000 unionized support staff, 3,500 administrators, as well as 2,200 non-unionized support staff. If we were to focus on one particular staff grouping, let's say teachers, we can click on this teachers page and it would filter our results down to just those working in teacher roles with a bit more granularity about what type of role they are acting in. So for headcount and FTE by teacher group, we can see that we have enrolling teacher, special education teachers, counselor, librarian, as well as some more specialized groups like psychologists and pathologists. Now, if we were interested in one particular staff group, let's say enrolling teachers, we could click on enrolling teachers and it would filter the data presented on the page to just those in that staff grouping. All of this information that you see is consistent across each of the 4 staff groups that are present in the dashboard, as well as when we go down to the district page, all of the same data is presented, but with a bit more granularity, allowing folks to decide which district or districts they would like to restrict their searches to, as well as what staff grouping they're interested in. So, for example, let us say that we wanted to see how many education assistants were working at the beginning of this school year in SD 36 or Surrey. What we could do is we could go over to our unionized support staff page, click SD 36, and then filter the results to look at the 2023-24 school year, but Q1, which is going to be covering the period of, I believe, July to early September. Let's actually say Q2, because that's actually going to be, say, October to December, which is when most school starts. And we click on education assistants, and we will be able to say that there are close to 1,900 education assistants working in SD 36 at the start of this current school year. On all of the pages as well, there is this filter for filtering out casual staff. These are those that don't have a full-time teaching or staff position. The most easy to explain one would be for the teacher grouping of TTOCs, so teachers teaching on call. If we go back to teachers for this particular example, and we exclude those who are TTOCs, what you'll notice is the headcounts are the only things that change. We do not include TTOCs or any casual staff in things like salary calculations due to sort of the on-call nature of their work, as well as we don't include them in student to staff ratios, again, due to their sort of ad hoc going where work as needed sort of works out. So again, the use of this dashboard and this data is at a very high level of summary statistics and basic counts and figures. What we do use this data for, and what's not sort of presented in this dashboard, are things like calculating attrition rates for particular staff groupings, which I know that Linda and the folks on her team are very interested in and have made a heavy use of this dashboard for sort of aiding their work in that. In the past, when we've received staff requests about teacher workforce or any other workforce, typically it has just gone to us when we've used this as a reference check to make sure that our numbers are consistent and whatnot. But it's currently not available on the data portal, but will be added in the future for folks to peruse through and make use of. And I guess before handing it off to Linda to sort of detail some of the more interesting work that can be done using this data and what we typically use it for, does anyone have immediate questions about this dashboard? And is this data something that folks would find useful in their day-to-day? Okay. There will be 10 minutes after Megan presents for some more questions if folks have them. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Do you have a user manual? That's a good question. There is a README page on this dashboard that details sort of the data collection process that the EDAS system uses to get district level data directly from BCPC. There's also a glossary of common reporting terms, not just to this dashboard, but that we use across all of our reporting. It also gives the updates on when we might expect future updates, the way that staff are categorized and broken down in the data, as well as some things to consider when using it. Now, you are able to make some multiple selections if you want to filter further down by a particular staff grouping. If you wanted to look at a particular age group by staff grouping. And there might be some slight discrepancies between the two pages, only because when we are filtering down the data to a district level, there are some staff, particularly non-unionized employees, that work at a provincial level, but aren't assigned to working in a particular district. So it's important that when you are using this data and trying to get the level of specificity that you are interested in, just to make sure they're using a district page or the province provincial page. You might have mentioned it and I missed it, but how is the data collected? Frequency. Yes, so the data is collected by BCPC, which is the BC Public Sector Employers Association. And they're actually the stewards of this EDAS system and the data within it. And then they provide that data to us for our use and analysis. They have a bit more specificity and a bit more granularity about this data when it comes to individual employee data that is masked from us because we're not allowed to see that. And the frequency of the data is every 3 months. So we just updated it a few days ago, and we are expecting the next update to happen in the next couple of months, which will be for Q4 of this current school year, so April through June. Does anyone have any questions in the room or further comments? Okay. Well, if that is it, then I am going to pass it off to Megan. And thanks, everyone. And if you do have questions about workforce related things, please feel free to send them to the reporting inbox. And when this dashboard becomes available, we'll be sure to send a link out for someone to explore.
Thank you, Jacob. Over to Megan. Megan, you're going to be talking about the K-12 workforce data to inform ministry policies. We'd like to hear from you. Over to you, Megan. Thank you. You can share your screen. I'll stop sharing and you can share. Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so, just to kind of build on what Jacob was saying, our team uses the EDAS dashboard pretty regularly. If we want to check sort of things like how many education assistants are there in Surrey. But when we have kind of more complicated questions, then this is where we work really closely with like Jacob and David to sort of look further into the data to kind of answer questions that we can't just look up ourselves in EDAS. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the slide and not my notes. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so my name's Megan. Like Tree said, I'm a policy analyst in the workforce development team in GAD. I'm calling in today from the traditional territory of the Likwita First Nations in Campbell River. And yeah, I thought this was kind of a cool opportunity to tell you a bit about the work that we are doing here in workforce development and also how we collaborate with the Education Analytics Office on workforce data. So first, I'll just introduce you to our team. We're your friendly workforce superheroes, a small but mighty team. We've got our director, Linda Badouche, Marlena Stubbing, Mimi Lynn, and myself. We very much love pastries and all things dessert related. And in terms of what we do, really we monitor the K-12 workforce and make policy recommendations and implement initiatives to support a qualified, stable, and engaged K-12 workforce. And I would say our ultimate goal is for the sector to have the right people with the right training in the right positions at the right time. And so we also support the ministry with teacher and support staff bargaining. So, doing research, policy positions, that kind of thing. We work closely with the BC Public School Employers Association on a variety of initiatives. So that's the Employers Association that represents all 60 public school districts. And then we're also here as a resource for the ministry to support you in your work at times when it might intersect with workforce. So I think a good example of that is if you're working on an initiative that might involve creating a new role within a school district. There might be some considerations around collective agreements with that. Perhaps some negotiations would be needed with one of the unions. And so that's a place where we could provide some guidance or assistance. So just a little context setting. I'm sure that you're all aware that there are workforce shortages in the K-12 sector in BC. And this isn't just impacting our province. We see workforce challenges across Canada and globally. And it's impacting the sector broadly and all types of positions. So teachers, support staff, education assistants, bus drivers, school principals, you name it. And it's impacting both public and independent schools alike across the province. And so you can see by the headlines on the screen here that this is a hot topic in the media right now. And we also hear frequently from education partners that they're struggling to find the people that they need. And for a while now, this sector has been calling on the ministry to invest in a provincial workforce plan for the K-12 sector. And this is where we work really closely with the Education Analytics Office, to kind of say, like, this is what we're hearing, but what does the data say? Like, we know there are workforce challenges because the sector is telling us so, but we need to get that data and evidence to inform, next steps and policy and different initiatives. So I'm just going to provide, a couple of examples of how data helps us get a better understanding of what's happening in the workforce right now and where things might be going and what we need to pay attention to as we work with the sector to develop a provincial workforce plan. So this is a bit of a look at the current state in our province. If you were at Mary Shaw's presentation at the GAD stand-up yesterday, you would have seen a version of this slide. But essentially what we're seeing is population in BC is growing rapidly. It's concentrated in some specific areas, and the growth is due almost entirely to immigration and temporary residents coming into BC. And so within our sector, because of the collective agreement language around class size and composition, when there's an increase in student enrollment, that has a direct impact on the workforce. So over on the right-hand side there, you can see that for every 10,000 newcomers into BC, about 1,250 of them will be school-aged, which means we'll need 50 new classrooms and 50 new teachers, 7 new English language teachers, and 22 new education assistants. So, just think about that for a minute and what that means for those districts and high growth areas. There's a lot of pressure to meet workforce needs to support those classrooms. And then I think this slide is really cool. EAO is able to do some really sophisticated analysis by cross-referencing student enrollment data with workforce data from the EDAS dashboard. So kind of looking at, based on student enrollment, how many teachers do we need in the system? And so the green line there is the demand, so how many teachers we need. And then the pink line is the supply of new teachers coming into the system each year. And based on current projections, we need about 600 new teachers per year to meet enrollment growth. So that's a gap of 600 teachers. And this, this kind of data is really helpful in articulating the scope of the problem. And then the last data piece I'll leave you with today is just the teacher attrition data. So these figures show the proportion of teachers leaving the sector for retirement and other reasons, and it's broken down by age group. And so on the left is teacher attrition data from 2016-17, and on the right is from 2021-22. And so you can see when looking at these 2 years that the attrition rates, especially for teachers like in the earlier years of their career, so in those 24 to 34 age groups, it's increased a lot. And not to say that we wouldn't expect some attrition for people earlier in their career, that's normal and expected for some people to leave the sector. But at the rates we're seeing here, this is not normal, and it's actually concerning. So, we want to understand more about like why are people leaving the system early in their careers. And this is something we're hearing loud and clear from the sector as well. We showed this slide at a sector workforce meeting last month, and it generated a lot of questions, a lot of discussion and interest in sort of digging into this data and what it means. And so this is where I would say like the workforce data from EAO and the policy work that our team does can really intersect. So we can combine this data with other information that's available to us. So the BC Teachers Council, for example, does a survey of new teachers every 5 years or so. And so they recently released their 2021 survey data. So, and that kind of shows that there are a lot of new teachers that aren't feeling prepared for the realities of the job. There are some challenges that they're experiencing. So it kind of goes to reinforce what we're seeing here. And so it becomes really clear that when we're talking about, the workforce, it's not just about the need to recruit more people into the workforce, but it's also about retention. This is extremely important. So how can we create desirable workplaces where people want to come into this sector, and then when they get here, they want to stay? And we're also hearing this loud and clear from our consultations with the sector as well. So retention is a key component of the K-12 workforce plan, which I'm going to share with you next. Kevin, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Just looking at that slide before, I just had a question on interpreting it. Thanks. Now, are those numbers, so like, let's say, are those numbers like 14% of that under 24 total group by that age group left, or is that 14% of attrition? Does that make sense? I'm wondering if did 14% of that age group leave?
Yeah, I can answer that for you,
Okay,
Kevin.
yeah.
So what it's showing there is the percent of the people within that age group that left after 1 year. And what we've also filtered out are the people leaving on maternity leave. So this is people leaving because they were either terminated, left voluntarily, some long-term disability, something like that.
Okay. I think you answered it. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, David, as well. Petra.
Thank you. Sorry. Just a follow-up question to that then, with the attrition rates. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but I am curious about the contribution of disability, for example, to the attrition rates. And maybe I could just follow up with somebody offline after, but I'd be curious to know about that.
Yeah, we'd have to look at that one separately. There's certainly going to be a very small component of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And Megan, there's a question in the chat that ask about like, does the number of teachers needed to match upcoming enrollment take into account the number of teachers leaving every year?
The answer to Tracy's question is yes, it does.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, David, for fielding those questions, because yeah, really appreciate it. Okay. So I will move on and just talk a little bit about the workforce plan. So this is sort of a high level like plan on a page. Since last spring, we've been working with the sector to develop the workforce plan. So we're taking a really collaborative approach to this work. So we've been engaging with, all the education partners, unions, employers associations, Indigenous organizations, et cetera. I'll kind of just talk through this at a pretty high level, and happy to have follow-up conversations with anybody that wants to get more into it. But in terms of our vision, we want to create a high quality and inclusive K-12 education system delivered by an engaged workforce, empowered through rewarding and valued career opportunities. And as a sector, our mission is to collectively support and sustain a stable, qualified, engaged, and respected workforce for the K-12 education system. So we developed some guiding principles collaboratively with the sector. And then just that circular graphic in the top right there just kind of acknowledges that this plan encompasses sort of the full spectrum of recruitment and retention. So, from attraction into the workforce to training and certification, recruitment and retention and recognition. And then the plan has 4 focus areas along the bottom there. So the first is to attract and retain talent through desirable workplaces and rewarding careers. So I think that really speaks to, kind of what I was saying in that attrition data slide, like how do we get people to, want to work in K-12 education, and then when they get here, how do we make them stay? And then the second focus area is around offering flexible, accessible, and robust post-secondary education and career pathways. So things like flexible delivery models that meet people where they're at, whether that's like online or blended or community-based programming. And then also looking at like creating more clear pathways to progress through your career. So maybe you're an education assistant, you want to become a teacher. How can you do that in a way that's accessible for you? And then the next focus area is around supporting adult well-being and professional growth. So again, another really strong retention piece there to, how to support people at each stage of their career journey. And then the last focus area is to foster cross-sector collaboration for an agile education system. And so this is really like, what can we do collectively as a system to support, that mission of a stable, qualified, engaged, and respected workforce? And so, taking this high-level plan, this year we've been working quite closely. We've held a number of engagement sessions with education partners to develop a roadmap that outlines short, medium, and long-term actions for each of the 4 focus areas within the plan. And we actually presented a draft roadmap at a recent sector-wide meeting just last month. And so we're working on updates to that based on the feedback we received. And so I will just kind of leave you with a bit of an overview of some of the initiatives underway. So, we've been working really hard over the last year to develop the workforce plan and roadmap, but we're also doing a lot of work now to support the sector with its workforce needs. So through the Future Ready Action Plan, we do have some, specific actions and funding associated with supporting recruitment and retention in rural and remote areas. So some of the work happening here, we are working with the BC Public School Employers Association to offer hiring incentives for teachers in rural and remote districts. So incentives between $5,000 and $10,000. And last year, this initiative supported 15 school districts to recruit 50 teachers in some of the most rural and remote schools in BC. And then we're also providing incentives to teacher candidates. So people, doing their teacher training to complete their final practicum in a rural or remote school in northern BC through awards of $8,000. We're also, again, working with the BC Public School Employers Association they've hired 2 recruitment liaison positions to support hiring in rural and remote districts. And we've provided funding for a new cohort of UBC's rural and remote teacher education program. So this program is offered through a blended delivery format where teacher candidates can continue working while they're going to school, and it's accessible to people across the province, which is pretty cool. The ministry has a commitment in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act action plan around recruiting and retaining more Indigenous teachers. And as part of this work, we're conducting a research and engagement project in partnership with FNESC that's looking specifically at school district recruitment and retention practices for First Nations teachers. So a lot of work happening around various initiatives underway to streamline certification and immigration processes for internationally educated teachers. So Mimi is doing a lot of work on this. And then we're in the early stages of developing a high-level competency framework to create consistency in training programs for education assistants. And so it's some work that Marlena is leading. And then we continue to collaborate with the Education Analytics Office. We're working on helping to redesign this staff component of the Student Learning Survey. So this is going to be a really helpful tool for us as we evaluate the initiatives in the workforce plan. We're also establishing a data working group. We'll be co-chairing with EAO. And lots of work around the workforce current state related to school district operated childcare on school grounds. So I'm over time. I will stop there, and happy to take any questions. Petra, did you have another question, or was that from earlier?
Oh, no, that was, actually I do have a question. Never mind, sorry. Yeah, I'm curious about, I think, the framework that you were showing about developing the workforce and retention, and how, like, my thought is that's a provincial scale. But I know that individual school districts can they have differences in collective bargaining language, and they can have different conditions. And so I'm curious as to how something like a province scale retention kind of program or whatever can integrate with individual school districts. And maybe that's a bit broad, but I'm just thinking about how there's that question of scale of individual school districts doing things, but then also the province doing things. So if you have any comments about that, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and good point. Like it is tricky because each district, is a little bit different, and there's the collective agreements that come into play. I think something that we would want to do, like anything on a provincial scale, trying to create opportunities for local flexibility, I think is very important. But recognizing also that school districts are the employers, so they will also have a big part to play in rolling out any type of workforce initiatives in their districts. And Linda, I see you came off mute. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, because I feel like that's such a good question. And I think that's something that we wrestle with, and probably a lot of program areas within the ministry wrestle with, because it's like we have, if we look just at the public sector, like 60 different employers doing 60 different things with like their local unique context. And at the same time, what we're hearing from the sector is we need more coordination because we have real issues, right? So we're trying to find the right balance between like taking that provincial, like coordinated approach, while also leaving enough space, as Megan was saying, to recognize that the unique characteristics and realities of all those employers, both on the public, but also the independent side.
Thank you.
I think there was a question in the chat, but I think David answered it
Okay. Yeah.
in writing.
Yeah, I see that. Thanks, David.
I'm trying. It's a hard one to answer.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well, Shri, maybe I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Megan. That was interesting and good for all of us to know more about workforce data. As you know, this has been our first series this year to bring to you, the analytics information sharing session, and we want to continue that for the next year. And so I'd like to invite Mahi, and so that we could reflect on what we had our experience this year, as well as how do we plan for next year. We'd like your feedback and all that. So over to you, Mahi.
Thank you so much, Shri. At some point, there was 170 of you. I'm mindful that there is now 149. For those who stuck around, I hope that you don't mind stick around for another 10 minutes, as we really do care about hearing from you to improve these sessions for next year. Let me just get on with it. The design around these sessions where, as ministry staff, we think it would be helpful for you to learn about some common indicators that we continuously collect data about. We had heard from everyone that they didn't know where the data is, and they didn't know what we have. They didn't know where it is or how to use it. And the sessions were offered to predominantly address data access issues and provide you with products that are easy to navigate so that you can self-serve. So on those two topics, we've got a couple poll questions. I'm hoping that maybe Kevin, you can run the first one and the second one and getting your input on that. So poll 1 is now live. Do you know where to find available data and analytical resources on the K-12 workforce, as well as student enrollment, demographics, experiences, and outcomes? Not at all, or very much so. You have five steps to choose from, and this will really help us to know if we've hit the target or not. So we'll keep this open for another maybe couple minutes, and then we move to the second one. Okay. On my end, the result seems to be stabilizing around 3.4 out of 5 scale. So you know what we have, most of you, it seems like. But let's go to the second question. If you know how to self-serve. So let's run the second poll, Kevin, please. Awesome. Now that you know what we have, do you feel comfortable using our resources to make a first attempt at resolving a data question? Again, 5 options, not at all, and very much so. Okay, slightly less than the first question, and I was anticipating sitting at 3.2. Hopefully next year we'll run this at the beginning and the end of the series, so we have a point of comparison as to how well we've done. Now, our initial kind of objective, as mentioned, was to make sure that you know what is available and that you can use it. But we are not program areas, policymakers, or people who administer the programs. That's kind of with most of you. And we want to make sure that we are covering all your needs. What we proactively offer may not address your data needs. So let's move us to the last question. And that's where we want to really hear from you. What are you working on that involves K-12 student and workforce data? It could be a policy, it could be a program, it could be an annual report. You may be in the initial design of policy program. You may already have something that you're evaluating. We want to hear from you, and you can enter your response to this question. Okay, maybe we'll keep that open for a little while longer while you kind of enter your observations. We'll be taking these, and this will be helping us inform our collaborations. I want to maybe just kind of come back to a point of reflection. If I'm sure you've all been in places where you took a risk and did something, and maybe it worked well, hopefully. Sometimes it doesn't. That was certainly the case here with us. I thought that we had to do this, and this was the first time that we took advantage of the time that we have with you to share something that we think is beneficial to you, and likewise learn from you to make our services more relevant. I don't know, I'm curious to hear from you. When was the last time you took a risk to do something? It seems like this one went well. Maybe open the chat, use a reaction, and let us know. I'm curious. I'm really glad by the results that we are seeing. Happy to hear kind of, your previous experiences doing something new. This is definitely new for us. We're learning. So feel free to share your reactions in the chat with us. If you did benefit from these series, let a friend or colleague know. Comments, compliments are all welcome. Reporting unit is there to receive it. I know for my team, this was quite a new set of activities for us. So thankful that you're here, and we definitely want to see you come September for the next sessions. We will be celebrating the end of the first year of doing this on the rooftop of Sticky Wicket come July the 9th for some game of volleyball. If you want to hang out with us and have fun, let me know. I'll send the invitation to you. And with that, thank you all, and maybe back to you, Shri.
Yeah, thank you, Mahi. I think we have a question from Nadine. Nadine, would you like to unmute and... Sorry, that was an accident. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So as Mahi mentioned, we are here, owners of all this data. And if you may have questions about the data, you can always write to us in the EDUC reporting unit inbox, and we'd be more than happy to reply and give you an answer for any questions you have. If you have a data related question, we have a data request form, and this is on the Education and Childcare, this page, ECC Data Hub page. Right at the bottom, there is a data request form, and you can click on this button and fill the form for any ad hoc request you have, any ad hoc data request you have, and this is going to directly get into our JIRA system so we can, look at it right away as soon as the question comes in. A few things about information we'd like to know when you send in your question. We'd like to know what kind of data that you are looking for, the time frame for the deliverable, the granularity of the data, where you're going to use this information, as well as, is there a frequency? Is it going to be often that you need the data? So that this way we can reply and answer to you with the data questions in a timely manner. So that's one way to reach us, with the data form, as well as the education reporting unit inbox, as mentioned here. Also, the recording of this is in the ECC Data Hub, which is right here, as well as we have recording of all the previous ones as well. Right here is, we have the recordings. Recording, that's what it says. And as Jeremy mentioned, we also have the ministry briefing decks on all of the subject areas that were released from time to time through the year. So we have all the decks as well as we have the data release schedule of when the data appears, when it's FSA or completion rate or STP data that you're looking for. We have a data release schedule as well. Links to all of this is provided in this page, as well as Mehul can provide it on the chat as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this session. This is the last of our session for this year, for this school year. We will be coming back to you in September, but we'd like to hear from you what else you want to see in this series. I'd like to thank our presenters, Jacob and Megan. Thank you so much for the insight on workforce data. Thank you, Mahi, as well. And I'd like to thank Kevin and Mehul, my colleagues, to help me, put this together for all of you. I wish you all a very happy and wonderful, hot, nice summer, which I'm looking forward to. And we'll see you in September. Thank you, everyone.